Russia's track and field athletes will not be allowed to compete at the Rio Olympic Games after the World Athletics governing body, the IAAF, refused to lift the ban imposed on the nation for state-sponsored doping. Now, the IAAF Council met in Vienna on Friday to vote on whether to readmit Russia. Russia's Sports Minister Vitaly Mutko had written a last-ditch plea to IAAF President Sebastian Coe, in which he claimed Russia was doing everything possible to ensure its athletes are indeed part of a clean Olympic Games. The IAAF extended the ban, however, on the All-Russian Athletic Federation in March, with Coe stressing that it would only be lifted if there was clear evidence of a verifiable change both in anti-doping practice and culture. However, athletes who can prove they haven't been tainted by the Russian system or have given assistance to anti-doping can still apply to compete in the Olympics. Well, let's bring you more on this all-important decision. We're now joined live by CCTV's Dan Williams in Vienna and Daria Bondarchuk, our correspondent in Moscow. Let's start with you, Dan. Of course, this decision was unanimous. Tell us more about the vote this evening by the IAAF.
Yes, as you say, I've just come from the news conference and a little chat as well with Sebastian Coe following this key decision. Of course, unanimous decision in the end, although the task force that was set up in light of the WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency report last year, came back. The task force did praise some efforts, some of the efforts that had been made by the Russian authorities since the suspension was put into place, but on the whole, fairly damning, saying that the IAAF have still got a long way to go in order for their athletes to be reinstated, and therefore the suspension, as you say, would be unanimous and would be put in place. There is still a crack, if you like, a window, what they described a very small window for some Russian athletes to be able to compete. That's any athlete that can show that they have been independently tested overseas, perhaps even trained overseas, then that window would be allowed for them. Of course, this ruling could be challenged legally. However, as it stands, even if that were to be the case, they would not be allowed to compete under the Russian flag. So a key decision here as far as the IAAF are concerned.
And obviously quite a difficult pill to swallow, I imagine, for Russia not being able to see their flag being flown at this year's Olympic Games. Daria, what's been the reaction to the verdict so far in Moscow?
Well, Russian Sports Minister Vitaly Mutko called that window of opportunity, that suggestion that some Russian athletes, if they prove that they were not tainted by the Russian system or have been outside of the country or have made this significant contribution to anti-doping investigation, may be allowed to compete as neutral athletes. He called that proposal absurd and said that this is an absurd plan to let some athletes compete while the rest of the athletics team will be banned from Rio Olympics. Also, he earlier said that the IAAF's decision will not be unanswered, that there will be the reaction to it. However, at this point it is not clear what exactly Moscow will do. But some previous comments from the Kremlin indicate that Russia may consider taking legal action to object this decision. And this means that, as sports experts have been saying, that Russia may turn to the Court of Arbitration for Sport to appeal the decision of IAAF.
Right, well, on that note then, Dan, what are the chances of an appeal being successful? Is this something that the IAAF is prepared for, some kind of appeal from the Court of Arbitration?
Yes, again, I've just been speaking to Seb Coe about exactly that, and he says that as far as he's concerned, this is an issue for the Federation. It's a decision by the Federation, and therefore it would be a huge surprise if the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, were to in some way overturn this to put down their own decision instead and take it away from the IAAF. So certainly that's not something that the IAAF are expecting. They are expecting, of course, some challenge challenges for potentially individual challenges from the athletes that could look to go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, hence why they've tried to preempt that with this potential small window allowing athletes to compete in some level, even if it isn't under the Russian flag. But of course that will not be of satisfaction. It will go to the International Olympic Committee, and there could be a surprise next week at that summit, potentially, or potentially further legal action. But of course time is running out. The Olympic Games is less than 50 days away.
And of course, Daria, on that note then, with the Olympic Games just 50 days away, it's quite likely that Russia will miss out on the Games this summer. What are the implications of that for Russian athletics going forward?
Well, this ban could potentially mean that at least 100
we do apologize for that. We seem to have lost Daria there in Moscow, but thanks to both her and, of course, Dan Williams live for us there in Vienna.